All right. Hey, lead up listeners, Mike Harbour, 2026. Really excited to have you join us for a new year. I'm excited about my guest today, Big Bet Leadership. The author is John Rossman. I'm excited to have this conversation with him. I've read bits and pieces of the book. John's a big thinker. He's worked for some big companies. He's worked with Bill Gates. He's worked with Amazon and helped them kind of move their marketplace into what we now know is everybody buys. I mean, John, let's be honest. As we record this, it's close to Christmas. Amazon's coming to my house maybe 3 or 4 times a day. What a business you guys built there. He's written a book called The Pig, The Lipstick, and the Playbook of Champions. Also, this book that we're really going to dive in today called Big Bet Leadership. And it's all about helping you, the leader, transform the way you think, transform the way you lead, transform the way your organizations produce and provide great customer service along the way. John, welcome to the Lead Up Podcast.
Mike, thanks for the introduction. Great to meet you.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. I'm excited to get into this conversation. I know I could have shared a lot more about you. Just real quick, tell us a little bit about your kind of background history, how you got to where you're at today, and tell us what you're doing.
Yeah. So I grew up in Oregon. I'm an engineer by background, and what I've always liked to do is figure out like how to solve hard problems. And so my 35 whatever year career has basically been about solving hard problems using all the tools that we use in business, whether that's technology or strategy or metrics or communication, incentive systems. Like I use them all to help solve a hard business problem. I did get to be an early leader at Amazon. So I was at Amazon for 4 years, 2002 through 2006. I led the launch and the scaling of the marketplace business at Amazon. And I had been a partner at Arthur Andersen before that. And I kind of thought I knew like a bunch of things. And I just learned so many things. And after I left Amazon, I was a partner at a firm called Alvarez Marcel. My biggest client was the Gates Foundation. One of my clients there pulled me into his office and he goes, "You do a really nice job of delicately taking the principles and the mechanisms from Amazon and inserting them into our work. I think you ought to write a book." So I talked him into being my partner on a book called The Amazon Way, then wrote a book called Think Like Amazon. Along the way, I started doing keynote speaking, left Alvarez Marcel, do my own direct advising. I got to be the senior innovation advisor at T-Mobile for 3 years. My client, Kevin McCaffrey, is the co-author of Big Bet Leadership. And what we wrote was a book that we wish we had had when we were trying to take a extremely capable company, but pretty monolithic organization and teach it how to do new things, right? In Kevin's case, it was to lead new business incubation. But a transformation means a major change in an organization, right? It can be a go-to-market change, it can be an operating model change, it can be an AI strategy, it can be a channel change, but anything that has a high ambition, but we know comes with lots of risks, needs a different playbook for how you actually test, manage, and lead these types of engagements. That's what Big Bet Leadership is for.
Yeah, I love that. As we were talking in the green room before we got started, I do most of my work in the healthcare space. Healthcare in America is in need for a major overhaul, right? Major transformation. But my question before we get too much into that is, what do you see as the number, let's just say top three things that get in the way of an organization being able to transform and move forward and change the marketplace?
Yeah. So the first thing is a lack of clarity, right? And so we'll talk about the need to improve customer experience or the need to improve our competitive position. And then they start on a grand journey, a transformation to do that. And what you have to do is you have to get at the right level on what in Big Bet Leadership, we call it the what sucks, right? Like get at the real what sucks, the problem that you have to solve and form a delicate definition of like what's the outcome, like how do we envision this working in the future, and then the things that must be true. And so the number one mistake is people take off, they actually not just start, but they make big commitments relative to these transformations before they really understand the problem that they are solving or have a hypothesis for the future state. So that's one. The second is the way that they lead them. They lead them with diluted attention versus a focused team. Diluted attention, especially on hard projects, always leads to, kind of the tyranny of the now, right? The things that my operational job always comes in first. And so this transformational effort always comes in second. These things are inherently risky, even in their best. Putting part-time leaders on them is the most controllable factor you have relative to success. And then the third thing is the way that we communicate. And as leaders, what they tend to do around these things is they talk about burning platforms, right? So like, we have to change, we have to be better, blah, blah, blah. And while that's true, it's not helpful. And it's not only not helpful, it actually causes damage because everybody does what we're inherently wired to do, which is we make meaning for ourselves, right? Like, so, oh, what does that mean? And everything. My job's changing, my job's going away, like we're doing it. And so what you have to do as a leader is you have to become a chief repeating officer and repeat the important things relative to both, here's the problem we are going to solve, here's our hypothesis for what the future state looks like, and the journey that we are going to take, which is fundamentally an experimental journey versus a committed journey because we understand a plan. Underneath all of that is just the recognition that if you want to do only things that you have a high confidence in, all you're ever going to do is very incremental change. If you actually want to innovate, if you actually want to change something like healthcare, you have to understand it's a wandering path. It's a guided path wandering that we have to do. So it has to be based on experimentation. Experimentation is based off of failure, right? Like, we have to understand these things are going to have experiments. We're going to learn from them. So we have to optimize for some different things. And those are the three fundamental things that senior leaders go, oh yeah, I get that, and everything, right? But it's like, no, you actually don't, because everything that you've been taught, everything that you've been promoted for in your career has been around predictability and running great operations on a day-to-day basis. It's actually not how to be a transformational leader.
Yeah, that's really good. I want to share with my audience something that you write about in the book. You call it a big bet vector. Let's first talk about what a big bet is, how you define it, what that means, and then what a big bet vector is and why that's so important to drive transformational change.
Brilliant question. So a big bet it gets called many things within an organization. It gets called a merger and an acquisition, a digital transformation, an AI strategy, an operating model redesign. Any of those things are a big bet, but here's what they all have in common. They have high ambition. So we're doing these things because we think they have the potential for actually dramatically impacting our business and our competitive position. And two is they come loaded with a ton of risks, unknown unknowns, things that you can't possibly forecast and understand. So all of these types of big bets have a dramatic failure rate, right? Like 80 to 90%, regardless of type of big bet, like vast majority of them. One study of major initiatives concluded that 8% of major projects are on time, on budget, but only one half of 1% are on time, on budget, and on impact. And that's what we tend to do is, okay, I got to get this project done. So they start backing off of the ambition that drove us to do this. That's why everything gets watered down. And although we may deliver the project or the initiative, it doesn't deliver the juice, right? It doesn't deliver the impact that we expect. So that's what a big bet is. As I said, the first thing is we have to create clarity around both what the problem is, the what sucks, and our hypothesis for what the future state is, the outcome definition. Think about what those two things are. I got 2 points now, right? So now I've got a big bet vector. This is the fundamental framework that if we define this and we test it and we beat it up, we persecute it, we play the devil's advocate against this thing and just like put it through the ringer before we commit to it. Now we can take that much better understanding of what it is and what it isn't, and we can lead it appropriately, de-risking it, the highest priority things first, and then we can lead it to success. And that is the fundamental simplistic playbook of big bet leadership. Gain clarity, maintain velocity, and then bring forward the high risk things early and test those out. So there's 3 critical habits that big bet legends have, and those are the 3 habits.
So get clear on the problem, right? Or the why do we need this change? Talk more about that, John. Why that's so important? Because I think a lot of organizations they have, they set a new vision, right? A new project, but are they really clear? Is it the right project or the right transformation? Have they done the work on what the real problem is? So talk about that a little bit in your experience.
So I'm an industrial engineer by background, right? One of the things you learn about in optimization or OR, operations research, is you can only optimize for one thing, right? Everything else has to subjugate itself relative to that one thing that you want to optimize. So one aspect of, a new mission or a new vision or like something we want to improve upon is we have to get clear on, well, what are we optimizing for? If we think about the equation for that thing, whether it's customer experience, well, what part of the customer experience and what is it that we are trying to optimize relative to that, and what are we willing to give up relative to it? So that's an example of the type of clarity that you need to get on the problem, because the outcome, your solution of what you want to get to, is very dependent upon how you define that. And if we don't define that at the right altitude, with the right clarity, with the right, like, this is what it is and this is what it isn't, then we're all left to have independent opinions relative to that. And that's the start of kind of the journey to nowhere type of initiative, where we all think we're talking about the same thing, but we're actually not talking about the same thing. I get invited in to do a number of kind of QA reviews or pressure tests of digital transformations. I tell the story of one in Big Bet Leadership, and I'll get invited in like, hey, John, we've got a digital transformation going on. I don't think it's going quite right. Can you come in and help us figure out where we are and what we should do? And great. And what I'll do is, I read all the project documentation I can get my hands on, and then I'll do 5 to 10 independent interviews. And the first 2 questions I ask is, what problem are we solving? What do we think the future looks like? What's the outcome? And Mike, I don't get just 10 slightly different answers. I get like vastly different. Like, we're talking about the same project here, and everything, right? And what oftentimes happens is they'll actually refuse to answer the question in some subtle way because they understand the trap that I've set. Because the trap is that as a leadership team, you've committed to an expensive proposition. You may have actually budgeted in the benefits relative to this, but we actually don't have a working definition for what the problem is that we are solving or what the future state is. And when I say it in those ways, they just go like, that's just irresponsible for us to go forward with it in that way. And I kind of like, I agree, to some degree, right? But that's where I help them adjust, gain clarity, we reshape an initiative, and then it tends to go forward from there. But that's the type of clarity and the debate. All of this is kind of based off of the Amazon style of writing and debating, writing and debating. Writing memos is the way that you gain clarity on any topic, but especially on complex topics. But especially on complex topics where you need to get the input and you need to get the understanding of a variety of people. Bezos has got a lot of interviews on this, of like why working in memos is such a better way as a leadership team to work. It is a different way of working than, kind of the standard language of a PowerPoint and a speaker shows up and we speak. The way a good meeting on a topic like this runs is a really good memo is written. It's sent out 3 days before. People read it before the meeting. We start the meeting with a round robin of questions and observations from the from reading the memo. That's a very different conversation than me showing up essentially selling a concept. That's a hard thing for executives to do their job, which is to really think through a situation and think about, like, what's it going to take to do this? Is this the right way to deploy our limited amount of resources that we have? Like, what are all the options that could go, let alone help me manage the risk relative to it? So my job as a transformational leader is to help pull the best out of everybody else in the room. It's not to actually sell the engagement, to sell the project. Very different mindset. You can get it done without working in memos, but it is by far the best way that I have found on complex topics to actually not just think it through, but to get the best out of everybody who needs to actually understand this. That's the way to do it.
So let's dig into that a little bit more, John, if we can. What what
Mike, I can dig in 8 more layers on that for sure.
Yeah, no, I want to learn. This is going to help people that are listening. It's going to help me as well. What's included in the memo? I mean, is it based
Yeah.
on a big bet vector, a mission, a problem? What's included in that? How do you? I'm gonna give you about 5 questions here and let you just kind of pick them apart. How do you guarantee people are going to review the memo before the meeting? Because people are so inundated with emails today, they just don't even pay attention to
Yeah.
emails anymore, right? So I'll let you
Right.
dig into those kind of questions.
So there, um, as I mentioned, this whole process is based off of Amazon's kind of working backwards. Start with the end in mind, work backwards. Start with the customer, work backwards. They talk about a 6-page narrative, a future press release, a set of FAQs, frequently asked questions, and a prototype. When we were at T-Mobile, we had to work with a team who didn't have this background of like what goes into a narrative, and everything. So we wrote very specific templates, guidelines, examples. And so we built off of those for big bet leadership and built a very specific set of memos to help build your big bet vector. Those memos are first the what sucks memo. So the what sucks memo encourages you to really understand who's your customer and like what's the real goal that they have, what's the real pain point, not the set of little trivial issues that they're having or the little points of friction, but like what's the real end game. And so it forces you to build better empathy and better insight into it. It concludes with a hypothesis of what we call the killer feature. Now, oftentimes, it's funny enough, in healthcare, I oftentimes get a client going, let's not call it a killer feature, let's call it the lovable feature. It's like, great, same concept, the lovable feature, right?
Yeah.
And it is a simple statement of if we could deliver this, we actually solve the what sucks. Then we go into the next memo, right? The outcome definition memo. We take that lovable feature, that killer feature, we expand it into a broader value proposition, and then we list the 5 to 10 things that must be true in order to deliver that outcome. Now, all of a sudden, I'm starting to think about the hard things, not the trivial things, the hard things, the risky things that I probably need to keep track of as I'm formulating this. Then we build not just a business case for this, but what's called the outcome financial memo. So the outcome financial memo recognizes that in most cases, what people do is they build a spreadsheet analysis. Everybody tries to frame it as like, these are assumptions, these are the forecasts, don't trust these numbers. But a week later, it just becomes gospel, right? This is the business case. This is what we're delivering to. And it's never included actually in the testing that needs to go on until the very end. So what we do with the outcome financial memo is, again, we talk about what are the critical either cost to control or the cost model to deliver an advantageous P&L out of this concept that we're going to do. One of the critical points of strategy is saying no to things. And where companies get bled out is they say yes to too many transformations that are a decent idea, but they actually don't have a supporting business case to actually support the transformation. And so we kill a lot of things at this point because, like, yeah, that's a real problem. That's a real outcome. But unless we can engineer a better financial model to support it, I don't think this is advisable. Most situations end up agreeing with us. But at the end of this set, we debate them, and then we create the classic future press release for Amazon. And that's an announcement to the organization. Now I'm starting to practice my chief repeating officer role. It's an announcement about here's the problem we're solving. Here's why our customers, our patients, our clients are going to love it. And here are the things we got to prove out here, and everything, right? We're not committed to this. We think this is where we're going. Now we're communicating in a helpful way. It's an internal fictional press release, but it starts forming the basis for, as I mentioned, one of the important parts that you need to do, which is communicate these appropriately. So those are the essence of the memos that need to happen. Now, your second question was, how do you ensure that people read this? And there's no slick way of doing this other than communicating early and often that you are going to be receiving this memo. The expectation is, and you'll actually, people who get into this, like, they can't operate any other way, because what you find is your brain actually processes things so much better if you have a couple days to think about it, right? Like, sleep on it, right? Like, that's a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
And what Kevin McCaffrey found, so he went to Google, ran strategy in the search business at Google, is he converted them to memos. And the leader of that business, Jeremy, he would not only read them beforehand, but he would send back redlined versions of the memo so the team understood, even coming into the meeting, what are the questions that Jerry has relative to this concept that we're posing. So those are best practices. It does take time to build up to this, right? But you don't have to do it all the time, just on these hard things. We give incredible templates that come with the book, and we have a set of prompts that can really help you accelerate your work on this. But at the end of the day, like, you have to understand it, you have to believe it, you have to be the master of this material. And that's what solving hard problems just demands. Making resource allocation decisions, committing to a major transformation, those are the most important decisions senior leaders make, because you have so few opportunities to actually, do I invest here? Do I invest here? Or do I invest here? Right? Those investment decisions have to be taken on with a higher degree of professionalism and commitment. That's my experience. Is people think that these types of decisions are just like every other decision. They're not. These are high stakes decisions. And ultimately, Big Bet Leadership is a playbook to help you make better high stakes decisions, because that's what these are.
So let's step on some toes here.
Oh, amen.
When you talk about high stakes leadership and moving the needle, I've got a saying I use a lot. I'm allergic to the status quo. And in my experience, status quo, mediocrity, average gets in the way of those big bets, where we're really trying to go. I mean, senior leadership, CEOs got this big vision, but then the culture's been thriving in mediocrity or status quo. Healthcare is right there, John. I mean, the reason
Big time.
healthcare is so hard to move and change right now is because it's a big mammoth that this is the way we've always done it, and there's not any real innovation, so to speak. There isn't a technology standpoint, but from a strategy standpoint, we're still doing things the way we always done. So let's talk about how
Yeah,
that
you
confronting
still
that.
really look forward to going to the waiting room and everything, right? So,
Right. Yeah, so let's talk
I'm
about
sorry.
that. How do we confront that mediocrity or status quo and turn that into a competitive advantage for us?
Yeah, well, Mike, I think we sing from the same hymnal here, which is like, that's why this is about leadership, and everything, right?
Hmm.
And leadership is a skill, and it's a skill to guide and influence others to accomplish a significant mission. So different types of missions require different types of leadership tactics, right? Like these are skill-based tactics. It's not just all presence or charisma that makes us a leader. So this playbook that I've been talking about is specifically like when we need to make a major transformation. But there's also just the day-to-day standards that we set in like how we run the business. That's more of the operational excellence aspect of the chapter. You mentioned a book that I wrote. It's actually a free ebook. So if you Google The Pig, the Lipstick, and the Playbook of Champions, it's the combination of kind of all my books and all my learnings. And it's a pretty simple ebook about getting your principles right, getting your operational leadership right, and then saving space and understanding this transformation playbook that we need to have called Big Bet Leadership. And I think it really takes an understanding on all three of those and a consistency in your commitments to standards. The right standards for the right situation needs to be the mandate. But your premise is 100%, which is that mediocrity and complacency hasn't become just accepted. It's actually become the goal within most organizations. And that's what I think when the companies that I'm most familiar with, and everything like Amazon or Microsoft or Starbucks, companies up here in the Northwest, like what those CEOs are doing is they're trying to get back to the company that was there 10 to 20 years ago, where everybody cared, where results mattered, where attention to detail, regardless of the type of detail, was not just expected, but you could kind of assume that there was a professionalism relative to it. And that we worked for a mission instead of the mission working for us. And I think that that's what so many companies are trying to get back to at this point, was like, we used to be all of these things. We've lost it for a lot of good reasons, but now we're trying to get back. And that's, a digital transformation or an AI transformation or a growth strategy. That's one type of transformation, but you're also talking about just a cultural change of rejecting mediocrity and stating standards. The biggest mistake that I see leaders making relative to, we'll call this culture and everything, is that people think that we have to make this place a great place for everybody. And this is where I might offend people. I might step on some toes, because I believe exactly the opposite, which is I believe you have to make it the right place for the right people, and that you have to make it clear and easy for the right people to be on the bus and for the wrong people to go, this isn't the right place, and to get off the bus. That's how you create a championship team. And that's what it has to be, is a high performance team.
Yeah, I love that. In my book that I mentioned, I wrote a book called Quit Losing Talent. And I talk about creating a place where people want to stay, but it's not a culture where all people stay. It's a culture that the right people stay, right? I teach coach up or coach out. We need to coach
Amen.
our people up to perform at a certain level, or coach them out if they can't, achieve that. So I'm with you there. We don't want, not everybody's for us, right? Not everybody. And I often talk to CEOs about, I say, look, John, you're the CEO of this company, but you're really the bus driver. And sometimes you're going to make a bus stop and people are going to get off, and that's okay, because they don't want to go any further with you. But your mission, your vision, your vector doesn't change. You got to be committed to that. So I use that reference a lot.
The consistent thing, if I talk to a longtime leader, a president or a CEO, and I'll ask him like, what's your number one regret that they have? It's that so many of them tell me, John, I knew this person wasn't the right person, and I waited too long in making a change. That is a consistent thing I hear. That's kind of like the main regret that senior leaders have, is somebody's not the right leader for this. It's not a judgment about them as a person or in their prior role or capabilities. It's just, this isn't the right person for this spot on the bus. and
Yeah.
they hesitated. They waited way too long because, we're friends. We
Right.
start thinking of this as a family versus as a high performance team.
Yeah. Yeah, I used to, I've been doing what I do for a long time, 25 years now. And I used to, help CEOs try to make people work. I don't do that anymore. I give them advice like, John, this person can't get you there.
Yeah.
They don't have the capacity to help you get to that next level that you want to get to. So I give a lot more advice around finding the right person, right? I don't believe there are any bad people. There's just bad
Yes.
fits,
Yeah.
for where we're trying to go. Um,
And the other thing that I've found, and I'm not a HR professional or a job design professional, but what I have found is that I'll have a job description in front of me and I'll ask, the senior person, like, what do you want this person to do? And it doesn't mirror what the job description is at all, and everything, right? And they need to take more thought in actually designing the role and the responsibilities and the consulting and the information, how decisions get made, and then also set quarterly priorities relative to this. And so many times people fail because we didn't understand what the real priority was relative to it. And so it's that upfront kind of expectation setting. Typically in any good disaster, there's two sides to the story, right? There's multiple causality
mhm.
relative to it. And that's one thing that I think senior leaders can do is do a better job at setting expectations super clear between senior team and senior team members. And if you do that, then the right person is set up to show their stuff. And I oftentimes find that lack of clarity on that is a core cause.
Yeah, look, that's so true, right? I also write in my book. This is not, to plug my book, but we're talking from the
No,
same
please,
language.
we're here to plug books.
I have a tool called a Who scorecard, right? And years ago, John, I got out of the Army in 1998. I went to work for a headhunting company. So I was recruiting healthcare executives. And you learn a lot about recruiting process and hiring process. I've interviewed tens of thousands of people, probably between 10 and 20,000 people in my life.
Wow.
But what we do now in my practice is we help companies develop what we call Who scorecards, and it's really based around who that person needs to be, not what can they do. Because there's a lot of people that have the education and the skill set, and they would be really good for one company, but not for you, right? And because of who they are, what their personality is, what do they bring to the table, how they understand, greatness versus mediocrity, all of those kind of things. And so we really help. We try to help organizations and I want to get into innovation with you. This is an innovative approach. And what most organizations do when they need to hire somebody, they just pull out the old job description,
Right.
the old job posting. They run the same ads. They run the same type of interviews with 30-year-old questions and think, yeah, we'll make it work. And then, 30, 60, 90 days in, they're like, oh my God, that was a mistake, but they try to make it work, right? So um, it's an innovative, it's not new, but it's like getting people out of this status quo mediocrity hiring process. Speak into that a little bit. Did I lose you?
Nope, I'm here.
Oh, yeah. Speak into where you've seen leaders who really understand hiring different the selection process where it's been more innovative than old school, the way we've done it for 30 years.
Well, I think yeah, I think the key is independent thinking is the challenge when you're trying to, are you hiring an operator or are you hiring an innovator? And those people can look very similar, but they probably have some different kind of who attributes relative to them, and they probably have a different orientation. An independent thinker is less concerned about what other people think about either them or their concepts, and they have a deeper keel. They have more confidence on, like, God, I think this is the situation. And they have the skills to bring other people along relative to that concept. And so I think that's the core attribute that I look for is like truly independent thinking, or do you care a whole lot about what other people think about you and tradition. Because if you're really in this game, you are going to upset people, not just outside your organization, but inside your organization. When I was at Amazon, so I was hired at Amazon in 2002. It was the third attempt to launch some type of third-party selling capability. The board, the press, the investors were just like, Jeff, don't do it. But all of Jeff's leadership team was also saying that. It's like, man, we're just going to stick with books, music, video, first party retailing, and we'll slowly do this. And Jeff goes, nope. So we formed a small pirate ship, and it was a battle internally, but we had a leadership principle called disagree but commit. And so I wrote a book called The Amazon Way about Amazon's leadership principles. This is one of the fundamental principles that makes an organization treasure independent thinking coming to a decision, but then like we all commit relative to that decision. And so that leadership principle is one of the fundamental couplings that like allows for all of this to happen, which is this active debate, making a change, making a decision, making a resource allocation. We debate it healthfully. We've identified who the decision maker is and what decision we're making. We pronounce that decision, but then we all go like, great, break. We're out of the huddle. Now we execute against it, whether we agreed with it or not. And that is such a rare and precious cultural attitude to have, because what happens in most organizations is people hold back. There's a passive aggressive mandate, like, oh yeah, like this is interesting, this is interesting is like one of those loaded comments I'll see from people like, oh, okay, there's something there, but they don't play their cards at the table. They hold back. They want to see what other people are doing, and everything. 3 months from now, when we're testing something, it's not going as planned. That's what tests do, oh yeah, that's what I thought all along, or whatever. Or they don't contribute what they need to contribute to help make this successful. That's the passive aggressive attitude that makes up so much of corporate America, and that's the stuff that makes leaders and cultures win in innovation or not win in innovation.
Yeah, that's so good. They good? They leave the boardroom and they go out and say, "This is John's idea. I really didn't agree
Oh
with it, but
yeah.
we got to make it happen anyway." And so they throw
Yeah,
John under the bus, right?
exactly. It's like, no, we as a team, and that's what I've seen the best leaders do is like we are making this decision and we are committing, and here's why, and it's like they don't allow they have a high sensitivity to language
Mm.
and specific words like, well, this is John's project, like that sort of thing would just set off a reaction. And that if you do that enough times, then it doesn't happen in the organization. One of them that I saw from Bezos a couple of times, and you only need to do it a couple of times, which somebody would reflect on, we'd be talking about a potential investment, something we wanted to do, having debate, and somebody would go, I think that would have a negative impact on our stock. That had no place in Jeff's mind as part of a decision-making criteria, because he believed in long-term enterprise value and that the merits of this idea, you can, he would always say like, the stock market, it's a popularity machine on the short-term basis, and it's a weighing machine on the long-term basis, right? And on the short-term basis, how people are going to vote on your stock is largely out of your control and stuff. And he thought that had no basis for how we made decisions because we weren't in control of it, right? And man, he would torch people who would come in with a comment like that. Now all of a sudden, like, okay, that's not part of our decision-making criteria.
Hmm.
Message taken. Like we move on from that.
That's good. That's good. Let's talk about what are three kind of competencies or traits. I don't know what I want to call them, John, but to really be a great, big bet leader, to drive change and transformation. What are three traits that a leader needs to have? And if they don't have them, who are the three people they need on their team to supplement
That
the
second question's a harder question, but I'm going to sound a bit of a broken record, which I think is also called consistency here, right? Which is you need to think clearly. Like, don't accept abstract, fuzzy thinking about the problem or the solution or the technology is going to fix it. Like, you've got to zero in on the problem, the future state, and is the juice worth the squeeze? Like, that's the type of clarity leaders need to have, because you're making a forecast, you're making a calculated risk about something that isn't direct line of sight, right? So this is again about high stakes decision making, right? So you got to be good at calculating those odds, and you do that by creating clarity, by having more information than the average person. The second is the way that you communicate, right? Like, the way that you communicate and the simplicity and the repeatability of that communication. We are hit by so many messages, even in our normal jobs when things aren't changing. But when it comes to making a change, like, you got to hit it time and time and time again, because that's what it takes for people to both absorb it and to believe it. And then the third thing is the way that you assign leadership to this, right? Like, at Amazon, we called it a single-threaded leader. I was the single-threaded leader for the marketplace business. Other places called it a directly responsible individual, a DRI. Kevin McCaffrey was the DRI at T-Mobile for new business incubation. You have to take a senior leader, not a low tier leader, a senior leader, and make this their mission, and then bring every other senior leader along for the ride relative to that. These things are hard. Don't make it any harder by allocating, low level, part-time, fractionalized attention to this. Those are the three most critical things.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, and look, leaders listening, they need to hear that, right? And not, you said earlier in the conversation, we people start out committed, but then they start to back off of that commitment, right? And we just have to, those things that John just talked about. You got to be committed to that until it happens, right? Until it happens. And I'm a big believer in thinking and working on my mindset and not letting my limited beliefs get in the way or others' limiting beliefs get in the way. And that's a huge challenge in the marketplace with leaders, because they have these big dreams, but people limited thinking get in the way a lot of times.
Well, Mike, you're paraphrasing one of Amazon's leadership principles again. So nice job. So again, wrote the Amazon Way about the Amazon leadership principles. One of Amazon's leadership principles was leaders actively work to disconfirm their beliefs, right? Well, that's an interesting way to frame it, right? What we don't need is more people telling us we're right. What we need is to learn new things. And what a good innovative leader does, instead of saying, well, that's a dumb idea, that would never work, what they frame it slightly differently. They go, well, what would have to be true for that concept, that capability, that technology to be applicable in my business? Now, all of a sudden, you're starting to frame experiments in your mind, like, okay, here are the things that would have to be true. How would I test that and everything, right? So they're always questioning, and they bring in people that they don't believe in, that they have a disagreement with on a topic, like, whatever it is. Stablecoin would never play a role in our business. Bring in an expert on stablecoin to talk about what stablecoin is and how it might impact your business. All you're going to be is smarter by having somebody who has a different point of view on a disruptive discussion teach you why they believe what they believe. You still, most of the time, end up where you started with, but now you have a much firmer understanding of, like, okay, here's why I believe what I believe, and you're keeping an eye on the future. Well, if these things change, now all of a sudden something like stablecoin or whatever it is might be important for my business.
Yeah, it's really good. I love that. So we talked about limited thinking or challenging our own thinking, how that can get in the way. Let's talk about habits. You write about championship habits in your book. I spend a lot of time with my clients helping them drive behavior change and habit change, because we can teach leadership theory and philosophy, but if we don't change the habits, then nothing's going to change, right? So
Amen.
Talk about the championship habits that must be developed, or some habits that maybe hold us back from
Yeah.
transformation that we need to be aware of.
Yeah. So one we've already talked about, which is write things out and debate them. So that's a habit. Two is cancel all of your meetings on your calendar and redesign your meetings from a zero basis, right? Like meetings shouldn't just happen. They have a job to be done, and most meetings don't understand the job that they are trying to get done. What's the input? What's the output? Who's running it? Those sorts of things. Um, Take more time in defining your metrics than you do today. So when we were launching or operating something at Amazon, we would spend as much or more time designing the metrics that would measure this new market, this new capability, this new feature as we would actually designing it. Because we knew that measurement was the key to continuous improvement, not just getting the features or the plan right up front. So spend more time on defining your metrics. Those are three habits that I would put in the championship habit bucket.
Yeah, love those. John, we could probably continue to talk for another hour and, not even get into the real nitty gritty of what we need to. But look, you've shared some great content with our listeners today. So I really appreciate you agreeing to come on the Lead Up podcast. We're going to share this conversation with a lot of people because as you're talking, I'm thinking of several of my clients or friends need to hear what you and I talked about. They also need a copy of your book, The Big Bad Habit, maybe some of those other books. You mentioned they can get the ebook, The Pig, The Lipstick, and The Playbook of Champions as an ebook by Googling that, correct?
Yep,
Where
that's
would
right.
we get a copy of Big Bet Leadership, and then how would we get access to the templates you mentioned as
Yeah.
well?
Okay. Great question. So, Big Bet Leadership, that's at Amazon. Beautiful hardcover book, Kindle version, audio version that had a great voice actor to it. The templates and all the GPT stuff is at bigbetleadership.com. You don't even need to buy the book. You can honestly get all that stuff, but the book's going to give you the context of why you're doing this and everything. So that's where to go. I'm John Rossman. You can find me on LinkedIn. Super easy to connect with.
Yeah, so rossmanpartners.com, John at rossmanpartners.com is his email. Reach out to John. I know there's some leaders listening that need to think differently. Look, as we record this, it's the end of 2025. You'll be listening the beginning of 2026. Let's don't finish another year the same way, right? Let's confront that mediocrity. Let's change our habits. Let's change our thinking. Let's lead our organizations to another level of leadership. And John is somebody that can certainly help you do that. John, thanks for making time for the Lead Up podcast today.
Mike, it's been my pleasure. Great to meet you. Thank you for all you do.
Yeah, right on.